A triple shot of unfiltered truth.
What we wanted to do and who we wanted to be in our 20s, 30s, and now in our very early 40s.
Success is amazing and wonderful, but also sometimes a little bit heavier.
It's really hard, I think, because the general public thrives on sound bites, right?
I don't care about a lot of things that I definitely used to or felt like would give me, calm.
I think what's happening in New York, I support most of that agenda. And I love that we're calling out the bad apples. We need to do that.
Welcome to the Triple. 3 women, 3 kids each, and a triple shot of unfiltered truth. Here we talk about all the things: life, careers, raising families, leadership, and shaping communities. This podcast is equal parts informative, inspiring, and fun. So buckle up, cupcakes, and here we go. I'm Sydne, president and founder of MRK Partners.
I'm Cathy Kohler, Chief Operating Officer of MRK.
And Meredith, Chief Revenue Officer of MRK. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about what we wanted to do and who we wanted to be and what we were striving for in our life in our 20s, 30s, and now in our very early 40s. And how that's changed and why it's changed and what you think influenced maybe what you wanted to be or what you were striving for when you were younger and what it looks like now. So for me, in my 20s, I felt this pressure, maybe from my mother, maybe from who I am, I'm not sure, but it's like the idea that I needed to do everything right. It wasn't perfection, it was just right. So what is the expectation of a young child? It's like to get good grades, to have the teachers like you, to be in the honors classes, to go to college, then get married, then have the baby. And like, I've always been on the vanilla track of like, look at all the things I can do. And I'm balancing all of this stuff. And sometimes even there would be times people would compliment, be like, oh my God, you're doing so many things. Like, and it makes it look so effortless. And I'm like, I am dying inside sometimes because I'm in the messy. And it was very like making sure that other people knew that I was doing all of the right things. And then as I've gotten older, and I do think having a family and having a husband who's much chiller and more relaxed than I am has made me really focus on different things. It's like I'm striving to make sure I'm okay and that the people in my small family circle are okay. And if that works, then I feel content and grounded. And then the things that I'm doing are more about the things that I enjoy, and it's bringing me joy and me happiness, not because anybody else cares or whether I care that they care. And that has changed for me a lot. And I do think like turning 40 makes you rethink a lot of things. It's like the back half of life, and you sort of are like, I don't really care about anybody else, but what's in front of me and what's important to me. So that's what's showing up for me right now. Wondering how you guys have either shifted or not shifted.
I'm not at the back half yet. I'm still approaching it, and I'm the oldest. So like,
right, exactly.
But I think, so I still want the same things, but I think in doing that, I expected myself to be perfect. Like I could make no mistakes. And I wonder if maybe some of this you can relate to too, but it wasn't actually about anyone else telling me I had to be perfect. It was myself saying that I had to be perfect and that people were depending on me to be perfect. I actually remember when I was in like 3rd grade, I told my dad, I was like, hey, my friends are getting paid for A's. And like, I've been getting A's for years. Like I got no B's. So you owe me some money. And he was like, no, it's cool. You can get a B. And I was like, no, it can't. Like, this guy's useless to me now. Like I can go get an A and find someone else who cares about it.
And we'll pay you.
Yeah, someone will pay me for it. But so I wonder if like how much of that was from outside pressure versus just me. But then going through life, I realized I can actually achieve more if I'm not perfect. Because the only way to figure out if something was right or wrong is to push yourself beyond that limit and not play it safe all the time. And that means you're not going to be perfect. Like I legit wouldn't raise my hand in class because I was afraid of giving the wrong answer. Like, spoiler alert, I had the right answer. I was so afraid to say it out loud and that it was going to be wrong. And so now I'm leaning more into like, okay, if I always play it safe, I can accomplish less. I could do less, and kind of understanding why did I think of it differently? And is there something I'm missing so I can ask that question? And it's okay to ask. And so I think that's my big difference over the past really like 5 to 10 years is really leaning into that.
I get that. Yeah. I want to thank you for going off script
You're
and
welcome.
not doing any of the questions that I prepared for. So thank you.
Yeah, I want a real gut check. You're unfiltered Sid.
Yeah, unfiltered truth. So I think I actually spent a lot of my very first years in that like perfection world. My parents got divorced when I was younger-ish. And so basically like my control and my way of control was saying, okay, like I'm overseeing my sister and my brother and like I am performing whatever duties I had to. I packed their bags. I made sure they were getting to school. Like I had everything laid out perfectly in my room because that was the control. And also I got A's and I did really well. And then it just kind of eroded over time. So I went from like really wanting to be that perfectionist to just being like, F it, you know, I don't care. I don't care about A's at all. I kind of went against the grain and I wasn't bad per se, but I decided I was not a rule follower and like I didn't care about control as much. And while I was motherly still, I kind of just completely changed. And then I think more importantly, what I actually desired was to be smart and be respected as opposed to being perfect, to be honest. And I think that's really how I've shown up in my later life, which is, you know, like architecting systems, not perfecting them or executing them perfectly. But it is interesting looking back. And like I say, I've said this multiple times, like when I was young, my sister was such a disaster and we would go places and she would like, I would have packed all of her clothes and everything would be perfect. And she would take everything out of the suitcase and throw it all over. And then she would like eat Doritos and wipe it on her pants. And I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, just get it together, right? But she was just so free. And like, I think I was just jealous of that, to be honest. But now we have completely role reversed where she is on top of it in control and I'm just like kind of along for her ride. So I'm like, yeah, I'll get what you're eating. You know, like, where do I go? Just tell me what to do. Drive me there. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And it's such an interesting shift in terms of the control that I used to know that I wanted or needed. And now, you know, I don't care about a lot of things that I definitely used to or felt like would give me, you know, calm.
That I totally get that. I definitely had that as a divorced parent or a child of divorced parents, like finding control. And as a mother, I still wrestle with it a bit. Like I think kids you can't control. You can't make them the way that you want them to be or perform and everything. And Margot constantly reminds me that she is not me and she is a challenge to me frequently. But it's good for me, but I still find sometimes when I'm fatigued or when I'm overstressed or whatever, that control shows up. It's like, why can't everyone just eat at dinner and use their napkins and like close their mouth when they're chewing and like all these things that aren't really gonna matter. I mean, they do in public, they just don't do at home kind of stuff. But it's like, I find myself going back to that old behavior of control. And we've even talked about it at work. And we've talked about, like, I can tell when you're stressed because you get into the weeds, you try to control more because it's like, that's what was comforting to us as children was that idea of control. And then when you're feeling good and you're calm and you're regulated, you let things go. And I do that too. And so my kids can absolutely see when I'm depleted is I'm yelling about things that really aren't that big of a deal.
Totally. And a quick follow-on story for Cathy, since my eldest daughter, I think, is Cathy. Like, she is Cathy. Like, I'm not really sure, but
we get along really well.
Yeah, I get her. I had a Cathy. She never gets B's, ever, right? And we don't pay her. Like, she actually likes to learn. It's incredible. I don't know where she came from. But she got a B the other day. And the reason she got a B was because she put the correct answer down, but couldn't find the right source in the thing that she was reading. So she literally wrote a note to the teacher that she couldn't find it in the article, but had the right answer. And they took off all the points and gave her a B.
So that's
incredible, right?
Yeah.
How did she react to that though? Like what was her
like,
conversation?
Mom, I'm really sorry. I got a B. And I was like, Blair, great. Also, don't tell your teacher these things. Just lie. And she was like, Mom, I can't lie. That's against the honor code. And I'm like, and this is how I'm a very different person than where I started. Yeah, I think this is the epitome of the difference.
That was me though. Like I cannot, like I need to tell you that I didn't do this, even though you would have never known that. Like I had to say that. And I think that it's interesting because we're all control freaks, like when we were younger, right? And then what is it that allowed you to let go of that control a little bit? And it's not until the point when you realize that your control is holding you back.
Yeah.
And like this, like mine is like the most simple story. I had everything super organized in my room and all of that. And I swam a lot. And so I was the swimmer that had the morning and the night practices. So it was just a lot all the time. And I realized I didn't have time to make my bed and clean my room if I wanted to also do all these other things. So I let go of that. And I was able to do more by letting go of that. And I don't know that I realized that at that time, but as I got older, I realized, okay, what do I care about and what can I kind of let go of? And I still struggle with it. I'm still letting go of things. And, but it's not until you realize you could do more with it that you let it go.
Right.
I tell Blair she should have gotten an A+, actually.
It does all the time. So boring.
It is interesting to look back though, at like where you were as a child, like how you came out early in your career and like being nervous to answer the question. I mean, when I was like 22 and I came out of college and I had my first job and I was in charge of this whole portfolio of clients. I worked at a bank and I had an assistant at 22 and I had all of these people. I had this job that made no sense for what I actually knew in my head about the job. And I wouldn't answer the phone. This was back when voicemail was still like a thing. And I wouldn't answer the phone and I would wait for people to leave a voicemail and explain what they needed. So then I could go figure it out, go talk to people down the hallway and then be like, okay, I have the answer. And then I call back and be like, I have the answer, you know, and act as though I knew what I was doing because I was afraid of answering the phone and be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like I've worked here for 6 days. And so it was a wild experience now where you get to the point, and I think you talked about this with Sid, where you get to the point where you're like, it's okay to ask questions and be like, no, I'm striving for something different. I'm not striving for that performance or that perfection or that A+. It's like, no, I'm striving to get to where I want to go. And it's going to be messy and not controlled. And maybe I'm not going to look super smart in this situation, but I'm going to get where I need to go now.
Well, I tell a lot of people at MRK when they're just starting and they're like, well, I didn't want to ask that question. My first few months at MRK, I would just watch Sid be on all of these crazy calls with these high power attorneys. And I'm new, right? Like I don't know anything. And she would say, wait, I didn't know what you meant by that. Can you explain that again? And she'd come off strong with her opinion, right? And then they would give theirs and then she'd listen to theirs. And sometimes she'd be like, well, this is why you're wrong and I'm right. And sometimes she'd say, oh, I get it. But you're asking this question and let me help you by saying this is where I was coming from as well.
Right.
And having the confidence to say, like, what did you mean by that was like, it allowed me to have that confidence too. And then I did so much more once I was able to do that on the spot.
Totally agree. I think it'll be interesting as we continue to move through our 40s and our not back half, but maybe middle-ish part of our life. And think about how it'll continue to evolve. Because that's, I think, the really cool thing is like, you're not stagnant, right? We're constantly evolving, like exploring, figuring out, doing therapies, doing all of the things to keep opening ourselves up to like what's next and what more do I want for this life. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation to have again in 10 more years.
Yeah.
Today, we are celebrating 11 years at MRK. And instead of listing out all of Sid's accomplishments, which is long, she's so inspiring, we wanted instead to talk about what the past 11 years have taught us in affordable housing, the things that nobody tells you that you're not going to read about, but what you really have learned in these years.
Yeah, and I think like this is a really important time to recognize, like, it's not Sid, right? It's MRK, like, I mean, Cathy's 10, Meredith's 3, Tiff's 8. Like, there's a bunch of people that are like this core group of people that have helped us get here. So while I feel old, I feel just so happy and thankful that this is like a group effort, right? And we've gotten to this point. And the things that are so amazing now were so different then, right? It was me sitting in a room, like being like, oh yeah, like I think we can get developer fee on this. Here's the income and expense. I was doing a model, you know, like I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like hard coding stuff. And now we have an entire analyst team. Like there's a team that does the things that, you know, I wasn't even doing well. So I just think that with time, so many incredible things have happened and we really have like kicked butt and done incredible things. But we now have an entire team of people that rely on us. We have residents, we have lenders, we have investors, we have partners, and there are communities that we are building. So I just think taking a second to recognize that success is amazing and wonderful, but also sometimes a little bit heavier, and just that it's amazing to have other people to be able to lean on with that heaviness, right? So like, I lean a ton on you two, and I lean a ton on other people. And I'm just so thankful that I have other people that are not only there to be leaned on, but also to carry, so much leadership in them and push this forward. Okay, so on that, the big thing that I think not a lot of people talk about is that, so we are in real estate, obviously, and we are in a very specific segment of real estate, which is affordable housing. We think in affordable housing that cash flow is usually guaranteed. You're saying, okay, like you're buying affordable housing in this location and the rents are lower and everyone wants to live there. And so all of these developers, they're making a ton of dollars and they have all of this cash flow and everything is wonderful. But I think that's not reality. And I think best laid plans don't always, go perfectly. And so, I want to open that up to you guys because I think it's something important that people need to know about. And it doesn't take a lot of deals to go poorly to offset a lot of wins. So I think that's the other thing. And I think something that we've seen throughout is, 2 or 3 bad deals out of 40 or whatever we've done really do hurt like the company and our progress. And I think it's just something really important to recognize throughout our journey.
Well, and we monitor a lot, and we know, I can tell when I first started, I had to know every single input everywhere. And now I can read a model or read a comparison and say like, this per door number, it just is off. This feels off to me. Like, why did that's not what it was before. And so you kind of pick up on some of that stuff to get ahead of some of these things. But what I remind everyone is that everything we've done is a projection. And at every point, it's a projection until it's not, but you're comparing it to future projections. And so people can get really bent out over, it's not perfect. This isn't exactly what it was. Well, yeah, of course it wasn't. We're trying to guess what it's going to be. And I tell them, it will not be this number. I can't tell you what's going to go wrong, but we need to build a little bit of cushion, but still make it realistic because we got to hit this number somehow. And we got to figure out if something goes wrong, how else can we do it to bring it back? And sometimes we're successful. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than we thought. But if you don't monitor it and watch it, then you'll never know. What's measured matters.
Right. Yeah. I think the interesting thing is someone who has been on market rate real estate for 20 years, like on the, in the finance world, and then coming into affordable it is a very different system. It is a very different model. And to your point, I think that the branding of affordable is guaranteed income, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that in many ways. But the expense system is very different. Yep. And you are at the mercy of economic, wind changes, and you do not, as opposed to market, have the ability to just raise rents because expenses increase. And that's been something that's been really interesting to me. And I think in the affordable space, the conversation is happening among developers. We all know that. And panels are about this discussion and everyone's talking. But I think once you step outside of affordable, that is not really understood about what risk that you're taking. And I think the other thing is, to Cathy's point about projections, you're projecting not only like what's the financial of this specific building and this micro market, but we're talking about major economic market swings, right? Like who's in the White House, what tax laws are being passed, like all of these major macro level issues are affecting our industry, like all industries. But I would argue, like, a lot of people think about, like, where is the economy? Like, are you a luxury good? And when the economy is booming, people are borrowing and buying nice things. And then when it's not, but I think we're less affected by the economy and more affected by legislation. So the things that you have to pay attention to in this market are very different than what you're paying attention to outside of the market. And that's been really interesting to me to pay attention to. And then what's branded within the developer space, affordable developer space versus what's branded kind of out in the world tangentially is sometimes very different.
Yeah, it's so true. So like, for example, when President Trump got elected the first time, the corporate tax rate changed by like 6 or 7 basis points, and that materially impacted our space, right? And so politically, changes that impact legislation are so impactful and can make a material difference to deals that are in existence or are in the future. So I think that, but I completely agree with your expense conversation, because we see, like, for example, payroll at all the sites going up dramatically. We see utility cost increases. We see real estate tax increases. We see insurance increases. We just see all of these increases. And at the market rate sites, you can just raise rents to accommodate that. But in our world, you cannot. Our rents are governed by the government and are not just fungible like that. And so we're stuck absorbing all of these costs or trying to find creative ways. And it makes it very tight and very difficult sometimes. And then you have things like epidemics. So like you have COVID, where all of a sudden people aren't going to work, and how are they getting paid? And so, I mean, there are just so many macro level things that impact cash flow that it makes it very difficult to kind of plan accordingly.
Yeah. And I think when you say, oh, I'm a real estate developer, everyone just sees dollar signs.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's not exactly what it is. Or people will be like, oh, it's really cute, you're in a nonprofit space. I'm like, we're in neither of those. We're like in this in-between phase that you're neither the nonprofit that gets all these funding and grants because you're a 501c3, nor are you a market rate developer that can jack up prices. It's like you're threading a really interesting needle in the middle of those two spaces and trying to be profitable, but still having, even internally, when you talked about the team, still having wage pressure at the corporate level. You're having expense increases just to operate your own company, and then finding the right people to continue to support it. So I think those are absolute challenges from a cash flow standpoint.
Yeah.
What's your thought on like the branding piece of it, and like what is challenging about being an affordable developer from like third-party views and some of the other struggles that aren't cash related?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from like third parties looking in, I think a lot of people look at affordable housing as either, you know, like Section 8 housing, which is a form of affordable housing, but is not strictly affordable. And they just look at it negatively. And then you have people saying like, that's not housing that we want in our area, right? And obviously we build beautiful, amazing housing. And then I think the other thing that's very difficult is sometimes the political pressure around it is not because of actually anything related to the housing, but because there's agendas that we're not in control of. And that really has been difficult over time, is to say, okay, like this potential group has this agenda that they're trying to push, and we kind of get caught in the middle of it, and then words are thrown around like slumlord and all of those things, and that becomes very difficult, and to me is kind of one of the harder things in our space for me to handle, like personally and emotionally.
It's really hard, I think, because the general public thrives on sound bites, right? And that makes everything difficult. And I sometimes when I'm tired and somebody that I don't know will ask me what I do, I don't even go to the affordable route because I am not ready for their opinion in that situation, right? Because there are lots of opinions and lots of assumptions about you when you say that. And some of them are fantastic and great, but sometimes it's a little bit challenging and you don't want to constantly just defend yourself, right? Because then that also starts a story or paints a picture as well. So it can be really difficult to even just explain to somebody what you're doing, just the average person that you're meeting who just happens to say, well, what do you do?
Right.
You know?
I think the soundbite thing is interesting because like we talked about it earlier, life is messy. Humans are messy. Things are messy. And so are lots of these stories. And so I think that can be really tricky when you're trying. And I know that like you have the drive, and that's the reason this is a mission-based for-profit developer. And it's our guiding like light, right? Like that's our North Star is like, how do we show up for residents and how do we serve people? And when the soundbite comes out that, you know, a developer's not doing that, it can be really tricky and it can be kind of a challenge to the whole process. And then you add in like regulations that delay things and like all of these other challenges that maybe aren't as visible to everybody else. But it's like at the same time, the three of us are people that are like, I love a problem because I'm going to figure it out. And like, I like being in the messy and trying to fix things and having the conversation and then looking back and be like, dang, like we solved that problem. We got over that hump. You like today's call, like we were navigating a new potential deal and all the creative questions that came up. Well, what if we did X, Y, or Z? And it's really cool to watch us try to figure out how to get over those hurdles, which has been really fun and wild to watch how everyone's brains work in those meetings too.
We put it together a couple years ago where somebody was like, what like motivates you? And Sid and I were like, well, we like to do a good job, but at the hard thing. Yeah. Right? Like not just that, we don't want to be like the best at the easy thing. We want to be good at a hard thing. So we love that challenge and we love like being able to do that. And then to also be able to help people at the same time, it's just like double whammy, like win-win. Yeah. But we love to be pushed. Like it's just something that gets us going every day.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our In the News. New York City recently launched public hearings to gather tenant feedback on rental experiences and housing oversight. The goal is to surface concerns and inform potential policy adjustments. However, critics, particularly landlord associations, argue that these hearings risk oversimplifying complex landlord-tenant dynamics by spotlighting property owners without fully accounting for regulatory, financial, and operational realities of running housing at scale. The broader conversation emerging isn't just about the individual grievances. It's about how cities balance accountability, sustainability, and long-term housing production. So I think when I think about this, I kind of refer back to, we had some leadership coaching and they were talking about, you know, in a vacuum, people think they're doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And in that vacuum, you maybe are doing that right thing. But then you put the two things together and two different sides and you have the wrong outcome. And everybody maybe had the best of intentions, but now they're pointing fingers at each other. And, you know, the road to hell was paved by good intentions. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of take a step back and not always assume that it's two sides and that there's a person against you. Mm. It's more like, hey, we both tried. Like you weren't being a jerk in any way. We were both trying and it didn't work. And how do we make this work now together? And I think that can be applied a lot to tenant landlord situations, right? Where it's hard. We got to get together and think like, how can we be a group effort here? And then also local jurisdictions and what their agendas are and how those are playing together. And I think you see the most growth when you see that teamwork aspect of it versus, you know, his or her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the idea of working together and building relationships is something that is the most important, is really understanding and building that foundation. It's like every good marriage, right? Like every good friendship like has a foundation. So when you have disagreements and you're not understanding each other, you have a foundation to be able to get to that result. And it has been hard. And it has not just been hard for us, but a variety of developers. Look, there are some bad apples out there for sure. Like, and we need to hold those people accountable and we need to navigate like consequences for that situation 100%. And there's always a lot going on in a whole story that I feel like has been really tricky. And look, I think what's happening in New York is, you made an earlier comment about agenda. And look, I support most of that agenda. I actually think the agenda, to your point, is really good. Like I agree with like fixing housing, ensuring that people have like healthy, beautiful places to live. And I love that we're calling out the bad apples. We need to do that. And there is a lot of nuance. And I think what you said is very true. There's a lot of details in there that aren't being told. But if we don't have the foundation of a good relationship between landlord and tenant, between developer and city, then there's nothing to go back on. And we start pointing fingers and it's an I got you, because if I got you, then it's good for me and I win and I come up a level. And what we talk about all the time is you don't have to push people down the ladder to climb up one. And that's what I think happens here in many of those relationships.
Yeah. And we see that. I mean, we see that like at our sites. We see that like in our portfolio and with other developers who are really trying to do good things. And that's why I think, honestly, sometimes like the news is really bad for this because it just like tries to publicize the sound bites, right? Like those little things that are gonna spin out virally, and that's not good. Like, here's an example, and I think it's to your point. Like, if you take it in a vacuum, for example, someone says, "Okay, I have roaches in my apartment." Okay, you have roaches in your apartment. Let's go in your apartment. Well, you haven't cleaned your apartment in a year, and there's stuff all over, and that means that you probably need help, right? Like, you need help, but like then now there are roaches in the 2 apartments next door to you. But if you only hear, I have roaches in my apartment, and I'm just being honest here, like that is what is the soundbite that goes viral, right? And then you have all these people are like, oh, they're terrible. There's roaches in the apartment. Okay, but there are a lot of parts to this story, and we want to do well and we want to do good. And we really want our residents to have all of the things, right? All the, like a beautiful home, all of these things, but we have to work together. And I think there has been this almost push recently to pull everyone apart. And that's what I think stinks the most is like, if we really could all sit down at a table, talk about it together and figure it out and not look for those viral sound bites and things that are going to get the most attention, then I think everyone would be so much better off.
Well, and it's really the parties that are monetarily benefiting from those sound bites that are pushing them and distracting from the true story. And I think one of the ways that we've been successful in having a situation where there was something that was disagreed upon is in the beginning, we just thought like, we're nice people. We truly want things for people, but guess what? They don't know me.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about us. And so we've got to show that. So sometimes you have to build the trust that you just kind of thought that they knew, but build that trust and show and talk to them and set up these things that will allow them to hear you as well. So I think if you're ever in this situation, just think back like, okay, are they listening to me? And that might not have been your fault, but what can you do to get them to listen to you? How can you approach this a little bit differently? And how can you then get them to learn from the situation as well? But if they think that you're just telling them lies, then they're not going to listen to you. Or if they're being charged, like energy charged by someone who's benefiting from a negative story, they've got to look at that too, because maybe they put their trust in the wrong person.
I think there's 2 things that are coming up for me in the conversation around the individual tenant and the accountability of the tenant to participate in their housing the same way someone would participate in their housing in a single family home or a market rate home. And one of the things that I think is really important, one that MRK focuses on, but also lots of developers do, is the resident program, right? So we're not just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do a roach treatment, we're going to spray, and we're going to check the box. It's like, this individual might need some additional support. And so how do we bring in resident services programs that can go in and coach and provide like, okay, this is how to properly clean and store food in your home, and this can help. And it's like going more to the root cause on some of those issues. And I think that's a thing that we continue to lean into and do well. And I know a lot of other developers do that too.
Well, and I think also if you have a program that is benefiting a tenant and they value it, then they go to their neighbor.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, look, like you're doing this and like, why? Can you do this instead? Because we're trying to be a part of this. And when they feel that community and they want to protect that community, then you get better results as well.
100%.
So sometimes you have to start a little bit in a different route, right? It's not just, to your point, the roach cleaning. It's like, okay, what can you do to build community so that the tenants can help each other understand it as well?
Like we have one asset in Southern California that, you know, it's like our shining star, and they have an incredible community approach. Like they take care of their building as if it was their own. Yeah. They have gardening clubs. They support each other. They are a team, and it is beautiful to watch. And there is pride in that ownership of that space, and it's really, really cool. Go ahead.
And sometimes it can start with just a garden.
Right.
Okay, now there's a community garden and the people who are gardening are protecting that garden. And then they're like, well, wait, then I need to also do this to protect the garden and this to protect the garden. And slowly it's like, extending beyond that.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of communities that are like that. And that's the goal, right? Our goal is to create that sense of community, that pride where everyone wants to be at essentially an MRK property. Like that is our goal, right? Because they feel supported and they feel good about where they live. It's interesting that there are a couple places where we really struggle to generate that sense of community. And I wonder if it's in places where there is a lot of this push and pull, right? And it's kind of residents versus landlords instead of working together. Because at a lot of those communities, like we support, they're like, we want to have a garden project. Look, great, we'll send you gardening supplies and seeds or whatever. Like tell us what you need. I think at that specific site, we had to have a discussion about overwatering. Our water bill was like out of control. It's like, what are we growing here? But I think we want this, right? Like we want them to be happy and to do all of those things. And so to me, sometimes it just comes down a little bit, honestly, politically, like what is the energy at that local level? And does it make developers not want to go into those locations?
Yes, right.
And in the end, that's 100% going to hurt them because that's where the housing is needed. Usually when there is that insane push and pull because they're very urban, right? And so like, is that breaking up of that relationship going to just do a disservice overall to affordable housing in that location? And the residents, I mean, it's the residents, forget the housing. It's the residents that won't have the housing in those locations.
Well, and I think the truth to that statement is it preventing developers to go. And like, we like tough things. We definitely do. But to your comment about a marriage, like it is a marriage when you're working with different jurisdictions and such. And walking into a marriage if the other side doesn't want to be in that marriage with you is difficult. And it makes you think like, okay, I'm going to spend all of my time on this, or not all, but a big portion of my time on this one property when I could spend that same amount of time on 10. It just doesn't end up being the right business plan for developers because it's going to stunt their growth.
Yeah.
It's sad.
And I think that's the conversation happening everywhere is like, where are we ripping off the red tape to get deals done and to get them done and say, welcome, like we want your housing. We want to be in partnership with you. And we want to do it in a way that supports the residents. If we all have that in mind, like we're going to get cool things done. And when we are yelling at each other, it doesn't work. I feel grateful that this happens in a very, very small percentage of our portfolio. But to your point, like it's a lot of energy on that very, very small percentage of the portfolio. And actually this week you talked about it, but we're issuing our impact report, which we do annually, done by our favorite amazing producer, Tiff. And this is this incredible report where you reflect on all the cool shit we're doing. And sometimes, when on the portfolio side, it's like, man, I spent 90% of my time on the thing that wasn't as exciting. But then I get the opportunity to look at this impact report and go, man, that other 90% of the portfolio is doing incredible things, building amazing communities. It's really, really cool. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to reflect on that. But I'd love it if it was 100% of our portfolio and 100% of our jurisdictions were like, hey, we want you here and we want to do what's best for residents. And look, there's stuff for us to learn too. Like we make mistakes. Like we don't always get it perfect. So, and we're also relying on third party, partners that help support these assets. And so we're not always aware. But I think we do a good job once we realize there is an issue. Like we're on it, we're solving it. But we do have to rely on whole teams of people that don't necessarily work for MRK to help support us in that same cause. And that can be a challenge too.
Yeah. To wrap up today's segment, we always wrap with a quote. So today's quote, which I think underlies kind of this whole episode, which is, this is hard. And we've all chosen to do these really hard things, but it is, the brick walls are there for a reason. They're not there to keep us out. They're there to give us a chance to show how badly we want something. And it's by Randy Pausch. And I think this is like a perfect quote to summarize. Like we run through these brick walls together and we just push and we push and we push because we believe that what's on the other side is more important than not getting there. And I'm just so proud of us for continuing to do that. Maybe we're a little bruised, a little battered, need a little more Botox, but thanks to you all. And I'm excited to see what the next 11 years brings. Thank you.
Oh,
Yay. Thank you.
Happy 11 years.
Can we believe it? No. All right. Making my wish.
What's your wish for the next 11?
That politics doesn't suck the life out of me. Thank you.
Love it.
Cheers to the first 11 and here's to the next 11 where we're going to do incredible things. And now I'm going to eat my cupcake.